My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 34, and I found out exactly how much my family thought my home belonged to me at a Sunday dinner, when my mother set down the gravy, folded her hands, and announced that my brother and his wife and their 3 children would be moving into my house at the end of the month. Not asking, announcing. And when I opened my mouth, my father lifted one hand without even looking up from his plate and said the sentence this whole family had been saying to me my entire life. "You don't get a say, Claire. Kevin already decided." What I did about that took one phone call and the better part of an afternoon, and it ended with my brother standing in my driveway beside a rented moving truck, staring at a locked door and a notice taped to the glass, his face going the color of the snow on the lawn. But that isn't even the part that broke them. The part that broke them was the single piece of paper I laid on that same dinner table 2 weeks later, the one with my name on it and no one else's. The one that proved the house they'd been handing out like it was theirs had never, not for one day, belonged to anyone but me. If you've ever been the person whose opinion was treated as optional, whose yes was assumed, and whose no was simply edited out, this story is for you. Stay with me, because the moment this turns is worth every minute. Drop a comment and tell me about the time your family made a decision about your life without you in the room. And subscribe, because what happened on the day that truck pulled up is the part I still can't quite believe. Let me take you back to that dinner, because I need you to feel the temperature of the room. It was the first Sunday in November. We were at my parents' place, the small ranch house they've lived in for 30 years, and the whole cast was there. My mother, Diane, who runs a room the way a conductor runs an orchestra, every emotion cued. My father, Walt, who has spent 40 years learning that the safest thing he can do in his own house is agree with my mother and look at his plate. My brother, Kevin, 37, the golden one, the one the sun was always supposed to shine on. His wife, Ashley. Their 3 kids, loud and sweet and oblivious. And me. The announcement came between the green beans and the pie. Kevin had lost his job, again, the third time in 5 years, and the lease on their rental was up, and instead of the conversation a normal family might have, my mother had simply solved it. "So," she said, beaming around the table, "we've worked it all out. Kevin and Ashley and the kids are going to move into your place, Claire. You've got all that room, and it's just you rattling around in it. They'll take the upstairs. You can have the finished basement. It'll be wonderful. Family, all under one roof." I remember the fork in my hand. I remember the exact weight of it. I said, carefully, because I'd learned to be careful, "That's my house, Mom. I'd need to." And that's when my father raised his hand, that small dismissive flag he's been waving at me since I was a child, and said it. "You don't get a say, Claire. Kevin already decided." And my mother nodded along like he'd quoted scripture, and Ashley was already talking about paint colors for what she called the kids' floor. And Kevin reached across the table and squeezed my shoulder and said, "Thanks, sis. Knew you'd come through." And just like that, in the space of 90 seconds, my home had been given away in front of me, to me, without me. I didn't argue. I want you to understand that, because it matters for everything that comes after. I didn't cry or shout or flip the table. I sat there and I felt something I'd felt my whole life finally come into focus, the way a word you've mispronounced for years suddenly looks correct on the page. I'd always thought my family didn't listen to me. Sitting at that table, I understood the truth was worse. They listened fine. They just didn't think my answer counted. In this family, I didn't get a vote. I got a list. You should know who I am because it's the whole engine of this story. I work in title and escrow. When you buy a house, somewhere behind the scenes, there's a quiet person who reads every document, who pulls the chain of ownership back through decades, who makes absolutely certain that the name on the deed is the name that should be there, and that nothing and no one can challenge it. That person is me. I read deeds for a living. I have spent 12 years learning one bone-deep truth that most people never think about until it's too late, and it's this. A house does not belong to whoever grew up in it, or whoever hosts the holidays in it, or whoever feels entitled to it. A house belongs to exactly one thing, the name on the deed. Everything else is a feeling, and feelings don't hold up in a county records office. I didn't grow up with money. We grew up in that little ranch, and the money in our family flowed one direction, toward Kevin, and the expectations flowed the other, toward me. Kevin got the car at 16. I got a job. Kevin got the college fund. I got a scholarship application and "you'll figure it out, you always do." When Kevin's first business failed, my parents remortgaged to cover it. When I needed $800 for a certification exam, my mother told me money was tight. I learned to need nothing. I told myself it made me strong. It took me a long time to understand that not needing anything had quietly been turned into not deserving anything, and that the two are not the same, no matter how many times a family says they are. 6 years ago, I bought a house. Not a nice one, a wreck. A foreclosure on a good street with a bad roof, and a flooded basement, and a price low enough that I could swing it alone, on my salary, with the down payment I'd scraped together over a decade of needing nothing. I did it by myself. No cosigner, no family money, despite what my mother would later tell the relatives. My name, and only my name, on every document. Because I am a title officer, and I would no more buy a house with a clouded title than a surgeon would operate with a dirty scalpel. And then I spent 3 years fixing it. I learned to hang drywall from videos. I tiled the bathroom twice because the first time was crooked. I refinished the floors on my hands and knees until my knuckles bled. I made that house mine board by board, and when it was finally beautiful, I did the thing that turned out to be my one mistake. I opened it to my family. I hosted Thanksgiving. I hosted Christmas. I let the kids run in the yard I'd reseeded and the adults eat at the table I'd refinished. And somewhere in all that warmth, my family quietly decided that a house where the family gathers must be, in some fundamental way, the family's house. They started calling it the big house, like it was an estate we all owned. My mother referred to our holidays at Claire's as if she were a stakeholder. I let it slide because it felt like belonging, and I had wanted to belong my whole life. I didn't understand that I was teaching them the house was theirs to plan around. I was teaching them I didn't get a say in my own home. So when they announced Kevin was moving in their minds, they weren't taking anything. They were simply allocating a family resource, and the family resource was expected to move to the basement and be grateful. Here is where most people would have screamed at that dinner table, and I want to be honest about why I didn't. I'd watched my mother win 1,000 arguments. She is a virtuoso of volume and tears, and the instant I raised my voice, I would have handed her the script she wanted. The selfish daughter, the one who won't make room for her own niece and nephews, the cold woman with all that space who won't share. There would have been a dozen relatives by Monday who'd heard the story before I could tell my side. I wasn't going to give her a scene. I read documents for a living. I was going to give her a document. I drove home that night to my house, my quiet, beautiful house, and I walked through every room I'd rebuilt with my own hands, and I made one phone call. Not to my mother, not to Kevin. I called Patricia, an attorney I'd worked alongside on 100 closings, a sharp, unhurried woman who'd seen every kind of family disaster a property can cause. I told her what had happened, calmly, start to finish. And then I told her what I wanted. I wanted the locks changed professionally the next morning, and I wanted a formal letter on her firm's letterhead, stating in plain legal language that the property was owned solely by me, that no other person had any right of occupancy or entry, and that any attempt to take possession would be treated as unlawful entry and trespass. I wanted it taped to my own front door before the end of the month. Patricia was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Claire, you know better than almost anyone that you don't owe these people a basement. You don't owe them a doorknob." And I said, "I know. I think I've always known. I just needed someone to say it out loud." She drew up the letter that week. A locksmith came on Tuesday and changed every lock in the house, and I held the new keys in my hand in my own kitchen and felt something I hadn't felt in years, which was the specific, quiet peace of a door that will only open for the people I let in. Now I have to tell you about my grandmother, because she's the reason I knew, deep down, that paper beats feeling. Her name was Rose, my father's mother, a small, flinty woman who'd grown up with nothing and trusted no one's promises, only their signatures. She used to say, "Honey, love is what people say, a deed is what they did." She was the one who, when I was 23 and saving every dollar, told me, "Whatever you buy in this life, buy it in your own name and keep the paper where you can find it." She watched this family. She watched Kevin be handed things and watched me be handed responsibilities. And the year before she died, she took my hand and said, "You're the only one in this family who understands that a thing you own and a thing you're allowed to use are not the same. Don't ever let them blur that line for you." I thought she was just being practical. I understand now she was trying to armor me for exactly this. Rose left me her wedding ring and a savings bond and that one sentence, and the sentence turned out to be worth more than both. The locks changed on a Tuesday. The letter went up later that month. And then I did the hardest thing of all, which was nothing. I didn't call to warn them. I didn't soften it. For 34 years, I had been the one who smoothed every edge, who made sure no one was ever uncomfortable, who absorbed the cost so no one would have to hear about it. I let that go. I let them walk toward the wall they'd built, and I did not run ahead to pat it. If you've ever made yourself the family's safety net, the one who quietly fixes everything so no one ever feels the consequences of their own choices, I want you to sit with one question tonight. What would happen if you simply stopped catching them? Not out of cruelty. Just stopped. You might find, like I did, that some people only ever learn the floor was real on the day it stops holding them up. If this is landing somewhere true for you, subscribe, because the day that moving truck pulled into my driveway is the day my whole family learned the difference between a house they used and a house they owned, and it did not go the way they planned. The truck came on the 30th, a Saturday, a big yellow rental, and I know exactly what it looked like, because my neighbor across the street, a kind retired man named Frank, who'd watched me rebuild that house from a wreck, filmed the whole thing on his phone and sent it to me later, not to gloat, but because he said, "I thought you'd want to know how it went, since you weren't here." I wasn't there. That was deliberate. I was at my own office, at my own desk, reading someone else's title work, while my brother arrived to move into a house he did not own. In the video, Kevin climbs down from the cab with Ashley, and the kids spill out, and they walk up to the front door with the easy confidence of people who've been told this is theirs now, and then Kevin stops. You can see the exact moment in the footage. He tries the door, and it doesn't open. He tries again. He cups his hands and looks through the glass, and then he sees the letter. The cream-colored letter on Patricia's letterhead, taped at eye level. He reads it, and his shoulders change. He steps back and looks up at the house. My house. Like it's just told him something in a language he didn't know it spoke. Ashley reads it over his shoulder and puts her hand over her mouth. And Kevin pulls out his phone, and I know who he called, because 40 seconds later my own phone lit up on my desk with my mother's name. I didn't answer. I let it ring. It rang again and again. By the time I left the office that evening, I had 19 missed calls and a string of voicemails that walked the whole arc of my mother's range, from confused to worried to furious. Claire, the door won't open. What's going on? Claire, there's some lawyer letter. This is insane. Call me. Claire Bennett, you are humiliating this family in front of the whole street. You call me this instant. Not one of them asked if I was all right. Not one of them said the word sorry. The resource had malfunctioned, and they wanted the resource fixed. And the fact that the resource was a person with a deed and a grandmother's voice in her head had not yet entered the conversation. By Monday, my mother had moved to the stage she controls best. She sent a message to the entire extended family, a dozen aunts and uncles and cousins, written in her finest wounded mother key. I'm devastated to tell you all that Claire has locked her own brother and his 3 little children out of the family home, with a moving truck in the driveway, 2 days before they had nowhere else to go. I don't know where this coldness came from. We raised her better. Please pray for Kevin's babies. My Aunt Janet replied with a row of broken hearts. A cousin wrote, so sad, that house was always meant for family. The family home. That house was always meant for family. A house I bought as a wreck, alone, and rebuilt on my bleeding knees, had become, in the story my mother told, the family home that I had selfishly seized. And then she called a family dinner. 2 weeks out, her house. So we can sit down like adults and fix this as a family. She wanted me there. She always wants an audience for my surrender, because for 34 years the audience had worked. I'd cave to keep the peace. I'd apologize for things I hadn't done. She had every reason to believe this dinner would end with me handing Kevin a key. So I decided to go. Not to surrender. To settle it, in front of the same people she'd been performing for. I asked Patricia for one thing, a clean certified copy of the deed. The recorded one, the one with the county stamp and my name, and no other. I put it in my bag, and I texted my mother 2 words, I'll come. And I felt the trap close softly around the woman who'd said it. The night of the dinner was cold and clear. My husband couldn't change my mind about going alone, so he just kissed me at the door and said, bring the paper. I brought the paper. I drove to my parents' little ranch and sat in the car for a moment in the dark, feeling the old dread rise, the lifelong urge to make myself small enough to be welcome. I let it rise. I let it pass. Then I went in. The whole cast was assembled. Aunt Janet, 2 cousins, Kevin and Ashley, sitting close together, righteous and wounded. My father in his chair, and my mother, moving among them with a coffee pot, the gracious hostess, the queen of a kingdom that was about to turn out to be a rental. She opened beautifully. She sat me down, pressed a hand to her chest, and told the relatives, not me, that she was just heartbroken that it had come to this. She said her daughter had a lot of space and a hard heart, that she'd thrown her own nieces and nephews out into the cold over pride. Aunt Janet nodded, though I noticed she wouldn't quite look at me. My father stared at his hands. Kevin shook his head slowly, the very picture of a wronged man. And then my mother turned to me with wet, wounded eyes pitched for the cheap seats and delivered the line she'd used to win every room for 30 years. I don't understand where this came from, Claire. We are a family. Family shares. And you, of all people, with all that room, deciding all on your own that... And then she said it again, the words my father had used at the first dinner. The words this family had been saying to me my whole life, except now she meant them as an accusation. Since when do you get to decide? You don't get a say in family matters. You never did. And there it was. The 3rd time I'd heard that sentence. She'd just loaded the gun and handed it to me. Grip first, in front of everyone. The room waited for me to cry or shout or fold. I did none of those things. I reached into my bag and took out one folded sheet of paper. I didn't stand and make a speech. I unfolded the deed, smoothed it flat on the dining table where the light fell on it, and turned it so the relatives could see. And I said, in the same level voice I used to walk a nervous buyer through a closing, "You're right, Mom. For 34 years, I didn't get a say. So let me show everyone the one decision that was actually mine to make." I touched the top of the page. This is the recorded deed to the house, the one Kevin tried to move into, the one you've all been calling the family home. I let that sit one beat. There's exactly one name on it. Mine, Claire Bennett. No one else. Not Kevin. Not Mom. Not Dad. I bought it 6 years ago, alone, as a foreclosure with a caved-in roof, with my own money, and I rebuilt it with my own hands. There is no family money in it, whatever you've been told. There is no shared anything. It is mine, the way the law means mine, and the way Grandma Rose meant mine. Kevin's head came up. That's not... He started, and stopped, because he had nothing. Ashley had gone very still. "You didn't lock your brother out of the family home," I said gently, because I wasn't there to be cruel. "You tried to move him into my home, after deciding, without me, that I'd take the basement. And when I said no, in the only language this family has ever respected, a legal one, you told the whole county I'm heartless." I looked around the table. I'm a title officer. I spend my whole life making sure the name on the deed is protected from exactly this, from people who feel like a house is theirs because they have memories in it. Memories aren't ownership. A holiday dinner isn't a lease. And no one gets to decide who lives in my house but me. My mother reached for the only tool she had left, which was to call me a liar. She got as far as, "You've twisted this. You bought that house with help. Your father and I." And that's when my father lifted his head. And for one moment, the same moment I'd glimpsed 100 times and never once seen payoff, his mouth opened, and he looked at me, and he said quietly, "She didn't have help, Diane. She did it alone. We all watched her do it alone." And my mother's head snapped toward him with a look 40 years old, and he stopped. He looked back down at his hands, and that was my father's last word on the subject, and I felt something in me let him go, gently, for good. Here is the part people always hope will be an apology, and I want you braced, because it never is. My mother did not say she was sorry. She cycled through everything else. She wept, loud and sudden, and when the room didn't soften, she pivoted to fury. "After everything we've done for you," she hissed, "this is how you treat your own brother? His children?" And I answered her, finally, in the same calm voice I'd kept the whole time. "Everything you've done for me, Mom, was let me host the parties. That's not the same as giving me a home. I gave myself a home, and you tried to give it away." Kevin was on his feet now, not righteous anymore, just scared. The way a man gets scared when the floor he was promised turns out to be air. "Claire, come on, we've got nowhere to go. The kids..." And this was the only moment my voice changed at all, because the kids were never the ones I was angry at. "The kids are welcome in my home anytime, as my guests, the way they always were," I said. "What's not welcome is the idea that you get to live in it because Mom decided you deserved it more than I deserved my own front door." I gathered the deed and folded it. "You decided. Now you get to handle the part where the decision wasn't yours to make." My Aunt Janet had picked up nothing, but she'd heard everything, and she set down her coffee and looked at my mother for a long moment and said the thing I'll keep forever. "Diane, you told all of us she locked them out of the family home." She shook her head slowly. "It was never the family home. It was hers. You just liked the parties." The reporter in every family is the aunt who finally says the quiet thing out loud, and Janet had just said it, and I watched it land around the table like weather. I had one thing left to do, and it was the easiest of all. I reached into my pocket and took out the spare key, the one I'd given my mother years ago, back when I thought a key was a way of saying you belong to my life. I set it on the table next to the deed, quietly, no drama, and I left it there. The key I'd given freely returned. The door had opened, mine again. My mother was still talking as I stood to leave, threats sliding into pleading. Claire, honey, we can fix this. We're family. But her voice had stopped being able to reach me, the way a song stops when you finally walk out of the room it's playing in. I looked at my father one last time, and he met my eyes. And I gave him a small nod that meant I understand, and it's all right, and I'm still going. Then I walked out into the cold, and I pulled the door shut behind me softly, with my own hand, because slamming it would have meant I still wanted something from the people on the other side. I didn't. The matter was settled. The deed was clean. It always had been. Here's how it landed, because I know you want to know. Kevin and Ashley found a 2-bedroom apartment across town. It was smaller than they wanted, and it was theirs. And the last I heard, Kevin had taken a job he considered beneath him and was, slowly, discovering that a roof you pay for yourself sits differently over your head than one your mother tries to take from your sister. The kids still come to my house sometimes, on weekends, as my guests, and they run in the yard I reseeded, and I love them, and not 1 inch of that ever depended on their father living in my basement. Aunt Janet told the family the truth, exactly as I knew she would, and the group chat that had sent my mother broken hearts went very quiet. And then, one by one, a few of the relatives called me, not to ask for anything, just to say they hadn't known I'd built that house alone. My father calls sometimes, only ever when he's in the car by himself, and I always answer those calls. My mother and I don't speak. I send a card on her birthday. It's a smaller family than the one I used to carry, and it's the first one that doesn't have my own erasure poured into the foundation. I kept the spare key. I know that's strange. It's in a dish on the counter of the house I built, and sometimes when a client tells me they're about to put a relative's name on their deed because it would hurt feelings not to, I think about that key, and I tell them, gently, what my grandmother told me. Love is what people say. A deed is what they did. Put it in your own name. Keep the paper where you can find it. If there's one thing 6 years and a moving truck and a single sheet of recorded paper taught me, it's this. The people who tell you that you don't get a say are almost always the people quietly counting on the fact that you won't use the one say that actually matters. And the day you stop asking permission to own your own life is the day you find out you had the deed to it the whole time. That's my story. 6 years of work, 1 phone call, 1 locked door, and a piece of paper with only my name on it. If this reminded you that there's a difference between a thing you're allowed to use and a thing that's actually yours, take that as your sign to check whose name is on the things that matter in your life. If you know someone who's always told their opinion doesn't count, share this with them, because they may need to hear that it does. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.